Welcome to Quaderno Academy, empowering excellence through education. Join us as we inspire growth and unleash your potential. Let's dive in.
When a loved one needs skilled nursing care, how do we really know they're getting the best help? It often comes down to this one single score. But that score is built on these tiny, tiny details that have absolutely massive consequences. So let's dive in and decode what that score is actually telling us.
So the big question is, how in the world do you put a grade on something as personal and complex as nursing care? It's a huge challenge that families and the facilities themselves deal with every single day. The answer is a system that's designed to turn care into data.
And that system is built around something called quality measures. Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is like a report card for a nursing home. But instead of getting an A or a B, they get a star rating, 1 to 5. And that simple rating is supposed to help families compare their options at a glance.
So let's peel back the layers on that report card, because as you'll see, not all residents are on the same kind of journey.
Okay, so the system basically splits residents into two main groups. First, you've got your long-stay residents, people who might be in the facility for years. For them, the goal is all about maintaining their health and comfort. But then you have short-stay residents, who are typically there for 100 days or less, usually right after a hospital stay. Their goal is super clear: heal up, get stronger, and go home. For this explainer, we're going to focus on that short-stay journey to recovery.
For those short-stay patients, one of the most critical grades on that whole report card is something called the discharge function score. It's basically a measure of success. Now, I know what you're thinking. This looks incredibly technical, and it is. The official definition talks about the percentage of stays where a resident meets or exceeds an expected score. A special algorithm actually creates a target for each patient, and the facility gets graded on whether the patient hits that target or not.
But let's just cut through all that jargon. The whole thing boils down to one simple, fundamental question. Did the patient's mobility get better as much as we predicted it would? That's it. It's all about meeting a very specific recovery goal.
So how do you turn a concept like getting better into a hard number? Well, it all comes down to meticulously coding very simple, very specific, everyday movements.
To get this, you have to look at a standardized assessment called Section GG. Staff doesn't just check a box that says resident can walk. Oh no, it's way more detailed. They measure exact tasks. Can they walk 10 feet? What about 50 feet with a couple of turns? Can they handle a single step, like a curb? Every single one of these gets its own code. And this is where the next layer of detail comes in, and it's brilliant. Each of those little tasks gets scored on this 6-point scale. It's not just about if they did it, it's about how much help they needed. And the key word here is percentage. If the resident is doing 75% or more of the work themselves, that's minimal assistance. But if the staff has to do more of the heavy lifting, that score changes completely.
And this right here is where things get really, really tricky. With all these little details, tiny coding mistakes are bound to happen. But these are not just typos. They have a massive ripple effect on a facility's score and on what that score tells us about their quality of care.
All right, let's walk through the first common mistake. This is a big one. It's when staff codes a resident's potential, what they think they could do, instead of what they actually saw them do during the assessment window.
Here's a perfect example. So a resident just had hip surgery. They're cleared to walk, but they refuse. They're in pain. The staff might think, oh, they could totally do this with just a little help, so they code it as minimal assistance. But that's wrong. The number one rule is you code what actually happened. The resident didn't walk, so the correct code has to be something like not attempted.
And the impact? It's huge. By putting in that higher score when the person was admitted, the facility just set a false starting line. It's way too high. And what that means is that the final goal, the discharge score they're supposed to hit, is now way harder to reach. They've basically made their own job tougher, and their quality score is probably going to take a hit because of it.
All right, the next common slip-up is just a simple misunderstanding of what those different levels of assistance really mean. The definitions are actually very, very specific. Okay, so check out this scenario. A resident needs a staff member to physically hold them up while they walk. A nurse might think, well, the resident's doing most of the legwork and code it as minimal assistance. But according to the official rules, the second you provide any kind of weight-bearing support, that automatically bumps the code up to at least moderate assistance.
The problem here isn't just that the score is wrong. This kind of undercoding actually hides how much help that person truly needs. It makes them look more independent on paper than they are in real life, and that can mess with their care plan and hide how much intense work the staff is actually doing.
And for our third scenario, we're getting into a very technical but really critical error. This is all about using the wrong code when someone doesn't even attempt an activity.
Imagine someone who could walk just fine before they had a stroke. Now they're on bed rest. A coder might see they didn't walk and use code 09, not applicable. Makes sense, right? But wrong. That code has a very strict definition. It is only for people who have never done that activity in their life. The right code here is 10, not attempted due to medical precautions.
And as you can see, the impact of this one little mistake is just massive. Using the wrong code completely rewrites that person's history. It suggests they were never able to walk, which creates a totally false baseline. The entire calculation gets thrown off, and the final score just becomes, well, meaningless.
So with the stakes being this high, how do facilities stop these costly mistakes from happening and make sure their scores actually reflect the care they're giving?
Well, it really all comes down to a handful of clear, actionable best practices. First, and most importantly, code what you see, not what you think is possible. Second, train everybody, and I mean everybody, on those GG scale definitions. Third, make sure nurses and therapists are actually talking to each other. Fourth, document everything. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. And finally, you have to audit your own work constantly to catch these errors before they snowball.
Because, at the end of the day, getting these small details right isn't just about chasing a better star rating. It's really about honesty. It's about accurately capturing the incredible hard work and the real progress that defines a person's journey back to health.
This entire system is really designed to create clarity and accountability, which is great. But it does leave us with one final, pretty big question to chew on. When we try to measure something as deeply human as care, with numbers and codes, what are the important stories that we might be leaving out of that final score?
Brought to you by Quaderno KO. Learn smarter, not harder.